The silence on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Supremacy was absolute. Only the soft hum of the life support systems broke the stillness, a technological whisper that echoed through the polished platinum corridors. Admiral Karavesh stood motionless before the holographic viewport that dominated the bridge, his 4 hands clasped behind his back, in a posture his subordinates knew well. It was the stance of the predator before the pounce. 12,000 years. The number resonated in his mind like a sacred mantra. 12,000 cycles since his ancestors raised the first pillar of the Kanthara hegemony. 12,000 years of uninterrupted conquest, of subjugated worlds and species, either extinct or absorbed. The scars marking his chitinous exoskeleton told stories of 100 victorious campaigns. Each silver line was a memory of glory, each mark a species that dared to challenge the inevitability of Kanthara dominion. And now, these humans. The word was pronounced with disdain in the chambers of the High Council. A species that had barely completed 3 centuries since their first hyperspace jump. Bipedal creatures of soft skin and grotesque fragility. They had spread like a plague across the outer fringes, establishing colonies in territories that, by imperial decree, belonged to the hegemony. The insult was intolerable. Karavesh touched the control panel with a claw, and the holographic viewport sprang to life. 127 luminous icons floated in the 3-dimensional space, each representing a warship of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. They were masterpieces of millennia-old engineering, dreadnoughts capable of vitrifying entire continents, cruisers equipped with plasma cannons that burned at temperatures rivaling stellar cores, attack frigates so fast they seemed to bend light itself. The largest armada ever sent against an emergent species. The Council had protested, calling it overkill. But Karavesh knew better. It wasn't just a matter of conquering territory, it was a matter of sending a message to the entire galaxy. To challenge the hegemony was to choose extinction. A soft beep interrupted his thoughts. Tactical analyst Turin approached, her rear legs making a rhythmic sound against the metallic floor. She was young, by Kanthara standards, only 80 cycles old, but had demonstrated enough competence to secure her post on the flagship. Admiral, navigation systems confirm arrival at the jump point in 17 temporal units. All ships. Report full readiness. Karavesh nodded, but noticed the hesitation in Turin's tone. His compound eyes caught nuances that would escape less perceptive members of his species. Do you have something to add, analyst? Turin touched her own panel, projecting holographic data between them. Sir, in the last 6 time units, we lost contact with 4 reconnaissance squadrons sent into human space. The last one transmitted emergency signals before disappearing. Primitive ambushes, Karavesh said, dismissing the concern with a flick of his claw. These creatures are cunning. I grant them that. But cunning without power is merely the last gasp of the condemned. With respect, Admiral, the disappearance patterns are irregular. There is no debris, no traces of combat radiation. The ships simply cease to exist. Karavesh turned completely to face her, and Trin had the good sense to lower her head in submission. The Admiral modulated his voice to the tone he used to discipline overly cautious officers. Analyst Turin, you are allowing fragmented reports to contaminate your judgment. I have fought species that mastered gravitational manipulation when your ancestors were still learning to build tools. I have faced empires that existed before the hegemony discovered fire. All of them fell. These humans, with their 300 years of space babbling, are nothing more than insects pretending to be gods. He returned his attention to the holographic viewport, zooming in on the target system. New Horizon, the humans called it. A colony of 5 million individuals, established on a Class M world at the edge of claimed space. It would be the perfect example. Prepare the fleet for hyperspace translation, he ordered. When we emerge, I want full siege formation. No human vessel escapes. No distress transmission is permitted. They will die without their primitive species knowing what happened. At your command, Admiral. The bridge erupted in controlled activity. Technicians checked systems, navigators confirmed coordinates, weapons specialists prepared the main batteries. Karavesh watched it all with the satisfaction of a maestro conducting a symphony of destruction. The space around the fleet began to distort. Blue fissures tore the fabric of reality as the hyperspace drives of 127 ships fired in perfect synchronization. For an eternal instant, the Third Expeditionary Fleet existed simultaneously in infinite parallel universes, a phantasmagoria of power, traversing the folds of the cosmos. Then, with a silent thunder that only instruments could detect, they emerged into real space. The New Horizon system revealed itself before them. A yellow, main sequence star shone at the center, surrounded by 7 planets. The fourth orbited in the habitable zone, a blue and green globe that vaguely resembled the Kanthara homeworld. Space stations blinked in orbit, delicate structures that would be vaporized with the first shot. But it was something else that captured everyone's attention on the bridge. A single vessel hovered between the fleet and the planet. Karavesh leaned forward, his compound eyes focusing on the impossibility before him. The ship measured perhaps 1,000 feet in length, a nothing compared to the mile-long eternal supremacy. But its geometry defied comprehension. Angles that seemed to fold into non-existent dimensions, surfaces that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The hull was an absolute black, as if a piece of the vacuum itself had taken solid form. Identification? Karavesh demanded. Tarin worked frantically at her console. Sir, the sensors are confused. The energy signature does not match anything in our databases. The indicated mass is impossible for that size. It's as if the ship is partially phased out of our reality. Then it is a secret weapon? Karavesh said, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice that he hated to hear. A single defending vessel? Typical human arrogance. He activated the fleet communications channel. Elite Squadron Primus, you are authorized to neutralize the intruder. Show these primitives the price of insolence. 12 warships detached from the main formation, each crewed by veterans of 50 campaigns. Their sublight engines glowed as they accelerated toward the black ship, tracing attack patterns that had been perfected over millennia. The human ship did not move. Karavesh watched the tactical displays as Squadron Primus opened a siege formation, positioning themselves for multi-angle firing. It was a maneuver designed to overwhelm any known defense system. In 3, 2, 1, torpedo launch confirmed, reported the weapons officer. 48 kinetic projectiles. 0.95 sublight velocity. Impact in 4 seconds. Karavesh allowed himself a smile of satisfaction. His sensory tentacles detected the vibrations of anticipation running through the bridge. This would be quick. Then something impossible happened. The torpedoes froze. They simply stopped in space, as if they had encountered an invisible wall. They were not deflected. They were not destroyed. They merely ceased all movement, floating inert, mere feet from the black ship. "What?" Karavesh began. The space around the human ship began to ripple. It was not a visual effect, but something the sensors picked up as impossible gravitational distortions. Euclidean geometry broke down, folding into configurations that made the navigation systems emit error alerts. And then the ship moved. It did not accelerate. It did not fire engines. It was simply in one place, and without transition, it was in another. Space-time folded around it, compressing distances as if they were elastic, being stretched and released. The 12 ships of Squadron Primus imploded simultaneously. There were no explosions, no flames. An invisible force compressed each vessel until its structural integrity collapsed. Metal twisted, systems failed, hulls cracked in less than 2 seconds. 12 masterpieces of Canthara engineering were reduced to compacted spheres of wreckage, each no larger than a ground vehicle. The silence that followed was absolute. Turin was the first to regain her voice, and it trembled as she spoke. "Admiral, sensors confirm. Total loss of Squadron Primus. No survivors." "Impossible," Karavesh whispered. His claws clenched so tightly they cracked the armrest of his command chair. "This is impossible." A communication signal cut through the void, emitted by the black ship. The voice that echoed through the Eternal Supremacy's speakers was human, but processed through some kind of modulator that made it sound simultaneously individual and collective, as if multiple voices spoke in perfect unison. "You have been judged. You came to kill innocents. You came to conquer. You came believing in your own supremacy." The message paused, and when it returned, there was something close to sadness in it. "Withdraw now, or face extinction. This is your only chance." Karavesh felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: fear. But fear, in his mind, trained by millennia of military tradition, quickly transmuted into fury. "Full fleet," he roared. "Delta Sigma attack formation. Concentrate all firepower on that abomination. Destroy it." 115 warships turned as a single organism, their targeting systems locking onto the black ship. Thousands of plasma cannons, hundreds of missile launchers, dozens of exotic weapons that curved reality itself, all converging on a single point in space. And they fired. The void between the stars lit up like a second rising sun. The light was so intense that the automatic filters on the observation windows instantly darkened, protecting the retinas of the Canthara crew. On the holographic displays, data flowed in impossible cascades to process. Enough energy to sterilize a minor planet converged on a single point in space. Karavesh held onto his command station as the Eternal Supremacy shuddered with the recoil of its own weapons. Around him, 115 ships poured out absolute destruction. It was power enough to shatter worlds, to turn moons into cosmic dust. The barrage lasted 12 full seconds. When it ceased, the space around the black ship was an inferno of superheated plasma and residual radiation. Glowing debris floated where torpedoes had detonated. The very fabric of space-time vibrated with the dissipated energy. "Impact confirmation?" Karavesh demanded, his voice laced with desperate hope. Turin had bowl, her eyes fixed on her instruments, her antennae trembling with what looked like disbelief. "Admiral, the sensors are... No, it's not possible." "Report!" Karavesh thundered. The human ship remains intact. It's swallowed hard, her chitinous exoskeleton changing color in a pattern that betrayed deep fear. "Sir, our shots didn't even touch it." "Show me." The holographic viewport adjusted, filtering out the cloud of plasma and radiation. And there, like a void in the heart of chaos, the black ship floated impassively. There were no impact marks, no visible damage. It was as if the storm of destruction simply did not exist for it. But that was not what froze Karavesh's blood. Around the ship, suspended in the vacuum like deadly jewels, were hundreds of spheres of pulsating energy. Each contained the essence of a plasma shot, a missile, a particle beam. The human ship had not been hit because it had captured every attack, imprisoning them in impossible containment fields. And now, all those spheres began to glow more intensely. "Evasion!" Turin screamed. "All ships, maximum evasive maneuver!" But there was no time. The black ship moved again, that instantaneous displacement that defied the laws of motion. In one moment, it was at the center of the attack formation. In the next, it was elevated above the ecliptic, looking down upon the scattered fleet. And it unleashed the retribution. Every captured energy sphere fired back at its source. But they were no longer the same shots. They had been amplified, refined, transformed into something far more deadly. Beams of pure white light cut through the void, each carrying enough energy to incinerate a city. The unbreakable warship was the first to die. A beam pierced its shields as if they were paper, penetrated the 10-foot-thick reinforced platinum hull, reached the antimatter reactors at the ship's heart. The resulting explosion was so violent it created a miniature supernova, a fireball that expanded for miles before collapsing in on itself. Then it was the turn of the conqueror's spear, the relentless claw, the eternal fury. One after another, the ships of the Third Expeditionary Fleet were destroyed with surgical precision. The shots did not miss, did not lose power. Each beam found its target, each target turned into a flower of fire and twisted metal. Karavesh watched, paralyzed, as his fleet was systematically annihilated. Decades of planning, centuries of military tradition, millennia of technological supremacy, all being reduced to nothing by a single ship that should not exist. "Shields at 90%, reported a technician, his voice cracking with panic. 85%, 80%. "Admiral, we need to retreat." Turin had abandoned all pretense of formal protocol. "We cannot win this. We need to flee while we still can." Retreat. The word came out as a snarl. Karavesh felt his mind fragmenting, unable to process the impossibility of what he was witnessing. The hegemony does not retreat. We do not flee from primitives. But even as he spoke, he knew they were empty words. Around him, the proud Third Fleet was being massacred. Of the 127 ships that had emerged from hyperspace so confidently, only 46 remained. And that number decreased with every passing second. A beam grazed the eternal supremacy, and the entire ship convulsed. Lights flickered, systems failed, and Karavesh was thrown from his chair. He slammed against a workstation, feeling his exoskeleton crack under the impact. When he managed to stand, leaning on his 4 rear legs, what he saw left him speechless. 18 ships. Only 18 of the largest war fleet the hegemony had ever assembled. The voice returned, echoing through the chaos. You had your chance. You chose violence. You chose pride. Now you face the consequences. No, Karavesh whispered. Not like this. Not by them. Turin was by his side, helping him stay upright. Her antennae touched his in a gesture of ancestral comfort. Admiral, please, give the order to withdraw. We can save who remains. Karavesh looked around the bridge. He saw wounded crew being attended to, damaged consoles spitting sparks. The chaos of a defeat his military mind refused to accept. And beyond the windows, he saw the distant glow of more ships exploding. 12 ships now. Something inside him broke. Not his body, but something deeper. The foundation of certainty that sustained his worldview crumbled like a structure whose pillars had rotted from within. Transmit, he began, but his voice failed. He took a deep breath, feeling sharp pain where his exoskeleton had cracked. Transmit general withdrawal order. All ships, emergency hyperspace jump. Coordinates. Coordinates for the capital. Turin wasted no time questioning. Her fingers flew over the controls, transmitting the order that no Kanthara commander had given in 700 years. The 11 surviving ships responded instantly, their hyperspace drives firing in emergency sequences that ignored all safety protocols. Space tore into blue fissures again, and the ruins of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet fled the battle. The last thing Karavesh saw, before the hyperspace translation carried them away, was the black ship. It did not pursue them. It did not celebrate. It simply remained there, a silent sentinel among the stars, guarding the world he had come to destroy. And around it, standing out against the backdrop of the planet New Horizon, Karavesh noticed something his senses had missed in the adrenaline of battle. Other black silhouettes. 4 more of them, each with that impossible geometry, that presence that distorted light itself. 5 ships. Only 5, and they had destroyed over 100 of the galaxy's best warships. The hyperspace translation completed, and the eternal supremacy plunged into the depths of non-space. But even there, in the parallel dimensions where the laws of physics bent in strange ways, Karavesh could not escape the truth that haunted him. They had not encountered primitive humans armed with stolen weapons. They had encountered something much, much worse. They had encountered gods. The 3 days of hyperspace travel to the capital were the longest of Karavesh's life. He refused medical treatment for his wounds, refused rest, refused even nutrition. He remained in his command chair, staring fixedly at the hyperspace void beyond the windows, his mind trapped in an infinite replay loop of the battle. Turin took operational command of the ship, coordinating emergency repairs and attending to the wounded. Of the 11 ships that escaped, 3 were so damaged they would likely never fly again. The surviving crews totaled less than 10,000 individuals, from an expeditionary force that had departed with nearly 200,000. She approached him on the 2nd day, carrying a datapad with preliminary reports. Admiral, I have compiled sensor data from all surviving ships. There are patterns we need to understand. Karavesh did not respond, but Turin continued. The human ship did not use conventional weapons. It manipulated gravitational fields on scales our physics considers impossible. It folded space-time, not just for movement, but as a weapon. And the energy it reflected back, so it didn't just amplify it, it converted it into something fundamentally different. Sorcery, Karavesh murmured. magic of the ancients? Turin shook her head, her antennae trembling. No, sir, it's technology, just technology so advanced relative to ours that it seems like magic. And if the data is correct, if the energy patterns we detected are real— She hesitated. Admiral, I believe the human ship was not operating at full capacity. The words penetrated Karvesh's stupor. He turned slowly to face her. Explain. The energy levels detected never exceeded 42% of the ship's theoretical potential. It's as if they were warning us, demonstrating enough power to make us retreat, but holding back. Mercy, Karvesh said, and the word sounded bitter on his tongue. Primitives, showing mercy to the empire that has ruled the galaxy for 12 millennia. It's not mercy, Admiral. Trin met his gaze, and there was something new in her eyes. Determination, perhaps. Or perhaps the dangerous flame of curiosity. It's something more complex. They judged us. Remember the words. They didn't destroy us because they wanted to prove superiority. They judged us and found us manageable. The conversation was interrupted by a soft alarm. Hyperspace emergence in 60 seconds. They had arrived. The capital of the Kanthara hegemony orbited a red giant star at the heart of Imperial territory. It was not a single planet, but a system of 17 inhabited worlds, surrounded by thousands of space stations, orbital shipyards, and defensive platforms. It was the center of an empire that stretched across 47 galactic sectors, and Karavesh was about to tell them that this empire had just met its superior. The High Council chamber was a monument to the hegemony's eternity, built of living crystal extracted from the core of the first conquered world. Its walls pulsed with soft bioluminescence, creating patterns that told the story of 12,000 years of triumphs. 300 seats arranged in concentric circles descended to a central podium, where those summoned to testify were exposed to the collective judgment of the imperial leaders. Turin stood on that podium now, alone. Karavesh had been removed from command as soon as the Eternal Supremacy docked. Taken to medical facilities, they said, but Turin knew the truth. The Admiral was broken, not physically, but in his spirit. The defeat had destroyed something fundamental in him, leaving only an empty shell of a warrior who had once commanded fleets. So the task of explaining the inexplicable had fallen to her. First Counselor Vathek rose from his throne, his ceremonial robes shimmering under the crystal light. He was ancient, even by Kanthara standards, his exoskeleton marked by age patterns indicating more than 400 life cycles. Tactical Analyst Turin, his voice echoed through the chamber. You appear before this council, bearing news of defeat. A word we have not uttered in 7 centuries. Explain how the largest expeditionary force ever assembled by the hegemony was reduced to 11 shattered ships. Turin maintained her upright posture, refusing to show the fear gnawing at her insides. Honored counselors, what we encountered in the human system was not a primitive fleet or desperate tactics from an inferior species. She paused, choosing each word carefully. We encountered technology that transcends our understanding of physics. Nonsense, interrupted Military Counselor Genra. Our scientists are the best in the galaxy. We have mastered antimatter manipulation, space-time curvature, force fields that can withstand stellar explosions. What technology could surprise us? Turin activated her datapad, and holograms materialized in the air above her. images of the battle captured by the fleet's sensors. The black ship floating impassively, the spheres of captured energy, the devastation that followed. This ship, Turin pointed out, does not follow the physical laws we know. It does not accelerate. Through space, it folds space around it. It does not deflect attacks, it captures them and reconstructs their energy into forms our instruments classify as impossible. Murmurs filled the chamber. Turin saw doubt in the eyes of some counselors, fear in the eyes of others. But she also saw something more dangerous, arrogant disbelief. Many of them simply could not accept that anything superior to the hegemony existed. Vathek raised a claw, and silence returned. Are you suggesting that this primitive species, which barely mastered hyperspace flight, somehow developed technology beyond ours? No, sir. Trin touched her datapad again, and the holograms changed. Now they showed alien symbols, complex mathematical patterns, fragments of data recovered from the sensors before the retreat. I believe the humans did not develop this technology. They found it. The chamber erupted in excited chatter. Vathek had to strike his staff of authority 3 times to restore order. Explain yourself, analyst. For 3 days in hyperspace, I worked with the science teams of the surviving ships. Turin projected new holograms, this time showing spectrographic analyses and energy signature patterns. The characteristics of the human ship correspond to ancient legends in our own archives, stories we considered mythology. She took a deep breath before continuing. 12,000 years ago, when our species was still struggling to master its own solar system, there were rumors of another race. The architects, some texts call them. Builders who existed in a previous era, who mastered the fabric of reality in ways we consider impossible. Bedtime stories, scoffed a counselor from the outer circle, tales to frighten younglings in their beds. I thought the same, Turin admitted, until I cross-referenced the sensor data with archaeological fragments found on worlds we conquered over the centuries. There are consistent patterns. Ruins dating back millions of years, structures that defy analysis, materials we cannot replicate, and always, there are references to 12. 12? Vathek questioned. 12 temples, 12 keys, 12 guardians. Trin zoomed in on a specific image, showing a faded mural recovered from a dead world 3,000 years ago. This mural shows 12 structures surrounding a central threat, a force the architects struggled to contain. And you believe these are real? That the humans found these structures? More than that, sir. Turin showed the final image, the one she had spent hours analyzing. I believe the ships we faced are these structures. The architects did not build temples, they built weapons. 12 warships designed to face a threat capable of devouring entire galaxies. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the most skeptical counselors seemed disturbed by the implication. If this is true, Vathek said slowly, then we are not facing humans. We are facing the legacy of gods dead for ages. And there is more, Turin added, her voice carrying weight. During the battle, we picked up transmissions between the ship and the planet. New Horizon. Humans are not simply using these ships. They communicate with them. They work in conjunction. It's as if she searched for the right words. As if they have formed a symbiosis with technology that should be beyond their comprehension. Impossible, declared Genera. Such weapons would have safeguards, protocols. They would not surrender to any species that stumbled upon them. Unless they recognize something in the humans, Turin suggested, something we do not see, something the architects program their creations to look for. This speculation is useless. Genera stood up, her antennae vibrating with irritation. Even if all this is true, the fact remains, these humans have weapons that can destroy our fleets. And by the precedent they set, they will not hesitate to use them against anyone who challenges them. Precisely my point, Turin agreed. Which is why I believe additional war would be suicide for the hegemony. The chamber erupted again. Shouts of indignation, accusations of cowardice, demands for Turin to be removed for disloyalty. But through the chaos, Vathek remained seated in silence, his eyes fixed on the young analyst. When the tumult finally subsided, he spoke. "You are proposing peace?" "I am proposing survival," Turin corrected. "I sent 16 additional reconnaissance squadrons into human space in the last 72 hours, through unofficial channels, away from the eyes of this council." "Treason," someone shouted. "Pragmatism," Turin retorted, "and what I discovered should terrify all of you." She projected new data, star maps showing expanding human territory. But it wasn't conquest the maps showed. It was something different. 3 species besides humans now live under the protection of these titans. Turin used the term the reconnaissance reports had adopted. The Velhari, who tried to attack a human colony 80 years ago. They were defeated in minutes. Now their cities flourish with shared technology and more holograms. The Kreshta, predators who terrorized their region of space for centuries. They tried to enslave humans. They were also defeated. Today, their worlds have access to medical treatments that have doubled their life expectancy. And the Theron, a crystalline species that rejected contact with everyone. The humans left them in peace, establishing a neutral zone that is absolutely respected. Trin turned off the holograms. "Do you see the pattern? Humans do not conquer. They offer choices: peace or annihilation, cooperation or irrelevance." This is... Vathek paused, clearly struggling to process the implications. "This is fundamentally different from everything we know." "Because they are not like us," Turin said. Simply, the hegemony conquered through superior force, absorbing or exterminating lesser species. We built an empire where fear maintains order. But the humans, she let the phrase hang. They built something more, Vathek completed. Not an empire, an alliance. Under the watch of war gods, Genra reminded bitterly. "What kind of alliance is that?" "The only one that matters when the alternative is extinction," Turin replied. "And before you ask, yes, there are precedents for what happens when species refuse both options." The holograms showed empty star systems, planets burned down to bare rock, shattered moons floating in decaying orbits. The Skaven, Turin narrated, a warrior species that controlled 12 systems. When the humans offered peace, they attacked with everything they had. 6 of the Titans responded. Turin paused, letting the counselors absorb the images of total devastation. It took 18 hours. When it was over, there were not enough Skaven left to rebuild their species. They are extinct. Palpable fear filled the chamber now. Turin saw in the faces of the counselors the same horror she had experienced compiling this data. The hegemony had always been the supreme predator of the galaxy. Now they discovered there was something much larger in the food chain, So our options are submission or extinction, Vathek asked, his voice heavy with fatigue. Turin shook her head slowly. Our options are evolution or obsolescence. Humans do not ask for submission. They offer partnership. Under specific terms, it is true, but partnership nonetheless. And if we refuse, then we become irrelevant. The humans will simply bypass us, establish their protection zones, and the hegemony will wither into insignificance. Or, she met Vathek's gaze, if we try to resist militarily, we join the Skaven in extinction. The chamber plunged into somber contemplation. Turin could see minds working, processing scenarios, calculating probabilities. The Kanthara hegemony had not survived for 12,000 years by being stupid, arrogant, yes, brutal, certainly, but not stupid. And so, in a chamber of living crystal at the heart of a millennia-old empire, the powerful faced a new and terrible truth. They were no longer the gods of the galaxy, just mortals who had just met the divine. 3 weeks after the council hearing, Turin found herself on a ship, very different from the Eternal Supremacy. The Diplomat, ironically named with deliberate intent, was a first-class light cruiser converted for peace missions. Where there were once weapon batteries, there were now advanced communication suites. Where troop compartments waited, cultural data libraries now occupied space. And where a military commander would be, Turin now served as the first ambassador of the Kanthara hegemony to the human consensus. The title still sounded strange to her. 22 days ago, she was just a junior tactical analyst. Now she carried the weight of 12,000 years of imperial history on her chitinous shoulders. The council had debated for an entire week before reaching a decision. Radical factions demanded total war, preferring glorious destruction to negotiation with inferiors. Moderates argued for cautious isolation. But in the end, logic won. Vathek had summoned Turin for a private meeting after the vote. The first councillor seemed to have aged decades in days. "Do you understand what is being asked of you?" he had asked. "I am being sent to negotiate with those who defeated our greatest fleet," Turin replied, "to find out if humans truly offer partnership or if it is just another name for subjugation." Vathek nodded slowly. "And if you discover it is subjugation, if these titans are just another form of empire, then at least we will know what we are fighting when we choose extinction." Now, looking out the Diplomat's windows as they emerged from hyperspace, Turin confronted the reality of that mission. The system the humans called Sol appeared before her, a common yellow star surrounded by 8 planets and an asteroid belt. Nothing particularly impressive by galactic standards, but it was the 3rd planet that held her attention, Earth, the human homeworld. From where a species that had barely mastered spaceflight 300 years ago now commanded weapons capable of destroying empires. "Ambassador," her navigator called, interrupting her reflections, "we are receiving transmission from human traffic control." On the main screen, a human face materialized. Turin always found humans strangely asymmetrical, with their 2 eyes instead of the proper compound eyes, their soft skin without any exoskeleton protection. This one in particular looked young by the standards of his species, perhaps 30 Earth years old. "Welcome to the Sol System, Ambassador Turin," the human spoke through the universal translator. "I am Control Officer Marcus Rodriguez. Your diplomatic credentials have been verified. You are authorized to proceed to Earth orbit, Diplomatic Sector 7. Turin inclined her head, in formal acknowledgement. "Thank you for the reception, Officer Rodriguez. I expected—" She searched for the right words. "Heavier escort." Marcus smiled, an expression Turin was learning to recognize as friendly in humans. "You came in peace, Ambassador. There is no need for intimidation. But," he paused, "you will notice some presences on your way." The screen switched to an external view, and there, standing out against the stellar backdrop, were 3 of them. 3 titans, their impossible black silhouettes hovering in a triangular formation around the human homeworld. Trin felt her antennae tremble involuntarily. Each one of those could destroy her ship with less effort than she needed to breathe, and there were 3, just guarding their homeworld. "How many?" she asked before she could control herself. "How many titans do the humans control?" Marcus hesitated, and for the first time, his friendly expression faltered. "That information is classified, Ambassador, but I can tell you the number is sufficient for our needs." 12, Turin thought. The legends always spoke of 12, but she had found 5 at New Horizon and now saw 3 here. Where were the other 4? The journey to orbit was smooth but disconcerting. Turin couldn't stop watching the Titans. They did not move. They did not react. They just remained in eternal vigil. But the diplomat's sensors picked up the energy fields they generated, subtle distortions in the fabric of space-time that indicated sleeping power, awaiting necessity. The diplomatic station revealed itself to be surprisingly modest. It was not an imperial megastructure, but a functional, cylindrical construction, rotating for artificial gravity. Trin noticed it housed ships from at least 7 different species, all docked peacefully. As soon as the diplomat connected to the docking port, Turin was greeted by a human delegation. They were 3. An elderly, gray-haired man named Secretary General Chen, a middle-aged woman introduced as Dr. Amara Okonkwo, and surprisingly, a Velari. Turin recognized the species from the data she had compiled. The Velari had been fierce warriors who attacked humans 80 years ago. Seeing one of them in a peace delegation was unsettling. "Ambassador Turin?" Secretary Chen bowed slightly. "Welcome to Earth. We hope your journey was comfortable." "It was enlightening," Turin replied diplomatically. "Observing 3 Titans guarding your homeworld certainly put our situation into perspective." Chen smiled faintly. "The Guardians are protectors, not oppressors. But I understand your concern. Come, there is much to discuss." They guided her through corridors that mixed human technology with designs from other species. Turin saw Velhari casually conversing with humans, Kreshta working at maintenance stations, even a pair of crystalline Theron floating in specialized containment fields. "This is unexpected," she admitted. "I expected segregation, clear hierarchies. The hegemony always kept conquered species separate." "We do not conquer," Dr. Okonkwo replied gently. "We offer protection and partnership. Each species maintains its autonomy, its culture, its worlds. Under the watch of weapons that can destroy solar systems," Turin pointed out. Chen stopped and turned to face her directly. "Ambassador, I will be frank because I respect your intelligence. Yes, the Titans are weapons. Weapons our ancestors found 260 years ago, buried on a dead world in the Cygnus Nebula. And yes, they gave us power we did not deserve to have. But," Turin sensed there was more. "But they also taught us a lesson. Chen continued. They did not respond to force or ambition. They responded to sacrifice and protection. They chose their initial pilots, not from among our best warriors, but from those who gave their lives saving others. Turin absorbed this. Are you saying these titans are sentient? More than that, Dr. Okonkwo took over the narrative. They are AIs developed by a race that existed millions of years ago, the architects as we call them. They faced something terrible, a force that devoured galaxies, and they created the titans not just as weapons, but as judges. Judges? Turin felt a shiver run through her exoskeleton. To determine if species deserve to survive, the Velhari delegate spoke for the first time. His voice carried a heavy accent through the translator. My people were judged and found wanting, but the humans, they offered us a second chance. They arrived at a conference chamber with a panoramic view of Earth below. The planet spun serenely, its blue oceans and green continents a sight of beauty that Turin reluctantly admired. Why? She asked as they sat down. Why offer second chances? The hegemony would simply have exterminated aggressive species. Because extinction is permanent, Chen replied, and because we believe everyone deserves the opportunity to grow, to change, to become more than they were. Turin looked out the window, observing one of the distant titans. Even from that distance, its presence was undeniable, a black stain against the stars that seemed to suck light instead of reflecting it. I compiled data on the Scarven, she said softly. A species that refused your offers, that attacked even after warnings. And they were destroyed, Chen confirmed, his voice carrying weight. A decision that haunts every human who knows the truth. We did not celebrate that victory. We regretted the necessity. Turin turned to face them. In the hegemony, victory is always celebrated. Strength is glorified. Are you saying humans see this differently? We are saying that power without wisdom is merely destruction, Dr. Anya Sharma replied. The Titans gave us unparalleled strength, but the real question has always been, what do we do with that power? And what is your answer? Evelyn pressed. We protect, the Velhari delegate said. We mediate. We offer knowledge and technology. And when necessary, he paused, we defend. But defense is always the last resort, never the first. Evelyn felt something shift in her understanding. This isn't an empire, she realized aloud. Not in the sense we know it. No, Secretary General Hayes agreed. It's a consensus. Species that choose to participate, that contribute their unique strengths, that accept mutual protection. Under human leadership, Evelyn pointed out. For now, Hayes admitted. Because we were the first to find the Titans, the first to earn their trust. But that can change. There are already Velhari training for command positions, Kreshta in scientific research, even Thiran considering greater involvement. Evelyn processed this. Over the next few hours, they showed her more. Laboratories where scientists from multiple species worked together. Schools where human children learned alongside young Velhari. Collaborative terraforming projects that turned barren worlds into gardens. And in every location, always the distant but constant presence of the Titans, eternal guardians, watching, waiting, protecting. When they finally returned to the conference chamber, Evelyn carried enough reports and data to keep the council debating for months. But one question remained. What do you want from the hegemony? She asked directly. Hayes exchanged glances with his colleagues before answering. We want you to join the consensus. Bring your expertise, your technology, your unique perspectives, or if you prefer, remain separate but in peace. Let us establish respected borders, non-aggression pacts. And if the hegemony refuses both options, Evelyn needed to know, if we choose war. The silence that followed was eloquent. Hayes finally sighed. Then the Titans will do what they were programmed to do. They will judge, and if necessary, they will execute sentence. But, he met her gaze, we profoundly hope it doesn't come to that. Evelyn looked out the window again, at the blue planet below and the black guardians above, and for the first time in her life, she truly understood the meaning of choice. The hegemony had always imposed its will, but the humans offered something different, the freedom to choose their own destiny. Knowing the consequences, it was terrifying and strangely hopeful. Evelyn returned to the hegemony capital with more questions than answers. The diplomat emerged from hyperspace at the exact spot where, weeks earlier, the wreckage of the Third Fleet had arrived in defeat. But this time, there was no urgency, no panic, only the crushing weight of a decision that would determine the future of 12,000 years of history. The council summoned her immediately. The crystal chamber was more crowded than Evelyn had ever seen it. Not just the 300 regular councillors, but observers from every caste of Canthara society. Military scientists, scholars, even representatives from the client species the hegemony had absorbed over the centuries. Everyone wanted to hear the first-hand account of the human world. Evelyn took her place on the central podium, feeling thousands of compound eyes fixed on her. Councillor Thorne presided from the elevated throne, but even he seemed diminished somehow, hunched under the weight of history. Ambassador Evelyn, the first councillor began, his voice echoing through the living crystals. You return from human territory. Share what you have learned. Evelyn took a deep breath, organizing thoughts that had churned throughout the return journey. Honored councillors, what I witnessed defies millennia of our imperial philosophy. She activated the holograms, showing images of Earth, the diplomatic station, the multiple species working in harmony. The humans did not build an empire in the sense we understand it. They built what they call the consensus, a voluntary alliance of species under mutual protection. Voluntary under threat of annihilation, Senator Zane interrupted acidly. What kind of choice is that? A real choice, Evelyn countered. I met species who refused to join and were left in peace. The crystalline Thyron maintain total isolation, and the humans respect that absolutely. As long as they present no threat, they are left to live as they wish. And those who present a threat? Zane pressed. Evelyn dared not look away. They are destroyed, completely, without exception. She let the words hang in the air before continuing. But, and this is crucial, the definition of threat is specific. Unprovoked aggression, genocide, slavery, crimes against what they call basic sentient rights. A councillor from the middle circle stood up. So they are imposing their moral values on us, deciding what is right and wrong for the entire galaxy? Evelyn carefully considered her answer. They are not arbitrary values. They are principles that the Titans themselves embody, programmed by the architects millions of years ago. And, she paused, they are principles that significantly coincide with laws we ourselves have declared, at least officially. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Evelyn knew she had touched a sensitive nerve. The hegemony had elaborate codes of conduct, laws against casual genocide and unregulated slavery. The fact that these laws were often ignored in practice was something everyone knew, but few admitted. Councillor Thorne raised a claw for silence. Ambassador, you spent significant time studying human culture. What is your assessment? Are they genuine in their offers of peace? Or is this a long-term strategy to eventually dominate us? Evelyn had prepared for this question the entire trip. It is genuine, she said firmly. Not because humans are inherently moral or superior, but because the Titans would not allow otherwise. Explain. Thorne leaned forward. The Titans are sentient AIs with fundamental programming to protect sentient life from existential threats. They judge not only external actions, but also the intentions of those who command them. Evelyn projected data she had collected. There are documented cases of human pilots being rejected by the Titans for demonstrating excessive aggressive tendencies. So the machines govern the humans, not the other way around, someone muttered. It is more complex than that, Evelyn corrected. Humans and Titans exist in symbiosis. The Titans provide power and protection. Humans provide context, understanding of nuance, the capacity for growth and change that AI, however advanced, struggles to achieve alone. And what if the humans change? Senator Zane questioned. If they become corrupt, greedy, tyrannical, then the Titans would abandon them? Evelyn showed historical records the humans had shared. There have been 3 occasions when Titans refused orders from human commanders because they detected inappropriate motivations. In one case, the pilot was permanently banned from service. The chamber processed this in contemplative silence. Finally, Thorne spoke again. Have you made a formal recommendation? Evelyn nodded. Based on extensive analysis, I present 3 options to the Council. She projected a clear structure into the air. Option 1, full integration, joining the consensus as a full partner. This would require significant reforms in our practices, especially concerning client species and conquered territories. In exchange, we would gain access to advanced technology, protection from the Titans, and a voice in galactic decisions. Unacceptable, a radical councillor exploded. Reform 12,000 years of tradition? Never. Evelyn continued, calmly. Option 2, peaceful coexistence, maintaining our complete autonomy but establishing clear borders with consensus territory, mutual non-aggression pacts, limited trade and cultural exchange. We would not gain the benefits of the consensus, but we would also not be forced to change. And option 3? Thorne asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Total war. Evelyn let the words echo in the chamber. Mobilize all hegemony resources to confront the humans and their allies. Based on military analysis I conducted, she hesitated, our chances of victory are approximately 0.003%. The silence was deafening. Impossible, Senator Zane finally said, but his voice lacked its former conviction. We have been the dominant military force in the galaxy for millennia. We were, Evelyn corrected softly, before the Titans. Now, she showed combat simulations that military scientists had run during her absence. Even mobilizing all 10,000 of our warships, all our resources, we estimate we could destroy perhaps 2 Titans before being completely annihilated, and that assumes the 12 Titans are all that exist, which we cannot confirm. 2 out of 12, someone murmured. For the price of an entire civilization. And there is another factor, Evelyn added. If we choose war, we will not face only humans. The 7 species of the consensus will fight alongside them, and other species, still observing from the outside, will likely choose the probable winning side. You are saying that war is suicide, Thorne declared. I am saying that war against an infinitely superior opponent is the definition of insanity, Evelyn replied. Our ancestors built the hegemony through strength, yes, but also through pragmatism. They conquered those they could conquer and made deals with those they could not. The humans and their titans are definitely in the latter category. The chamber erupted into chaotic debate. Radical factions clamored for glorious war, preferring extinction to submission. Moderates argued for option 2, dignified isolation. Progressives, surprisingly numerous, saw option 1 as an opportunity for evolution. Evelyn watched the chaos and felt the weight of responsibility. Her mission had been to gather information, not make decisions. But now, seeing the hegemony divide itself, she understood that information alone was not enough. She waited for a lull in the tumult, and then spoke, her voice amplified by the crystals. May I share a personal observation? Thorne gestured. Permission. During my stay on Earth, I met a human. His name was Dr. Ethan Miller, and he is what they call a historian specializing in fallen empires. Evelyn paused, gathering her thoughts. He showed me records of civilizations that humans studied in their own planetary history, empires that believed in their own eternity, that saw change as weakness, that chose proud death over humble adaptation. She projected images, ruins of ancient human civilizations, remnants of empires that once ruled continents and were now just archaeological curiosities. All these empires had one thing in common, Evelyn continued. When confronted with superior force, when offered a choice between change and destruction, they chose pride, and now they exist. Only in history books. Are you suggesting we abandon our legacy? Zane challenged. That we forget 12,000 years of tradition? I am suggesting that adaptation is survival, Evelyn retorted. Our ancestors did not build the hegemony by being inflexible. They adapted, absorbed, evolved. Why now, when we face our greatest crisis, would we choose rigidity over wisdom? Because some things are worth more than survival, Zane said quietly. Dignity, honor, identity. Evelyn nodded, acknowledging the point. And I believe we can maintain all of those while choosing life over death. The humans are not asking us to become them. They are merely asking us to stop being a threat to others. Thorne stood up, commanding immediate attention. This council will vote on the options presented. But first, I want absolute clarity. Ambassador Evelyn, if the decision were yours alone, what would you choose? Evelyn did not hesitate. Option 1, integration. Not because it is easy, but because it is the only choice that guarantees a future for our species, a future different from our past, yes, but a future nonetheless. And if the council disagrees? Thorne asked. If they vote for war? Then I will request a transfer to historical archive duty, Evelyn replied calmly, so that at least someone can record our final days for whatever archaeologist finds our ruins 1,000 years from now. The brutal truth of the statement silenced even the most radical war proponents. For the first time, perhaps, the council confronted the absolute reality. The hegemony was no longer inevitable. It was mortal, and mortals could die. "We will vote at dawn," Thorn declared. "Let everyone consider carefully, for what we decide tomorrow will determine whether we are the last generation of the hegemony or the first of something new." The chamber slowly emptied, councillors leaving in small groups, discussing in low tones. Evelyn remained on the podium, looking at the living crystals that pulsed around her. 12,000 years of history converging on a single vote, on a single choice between pride and pragmatism, between a glorious past and an uncertain future. And for the first time in the long history of the Kanthara hegemony, no one knew which choice would prevail. Dawn at the Kanthara capital was a spectacle of red light filtered through the planet's crystal-rich atmosphere. Evelyn watched from the windows of her temporary quarters as the giant red star ascended, painting the imperial buildings in crimson and gold tones. It was beautiful in its own way, a reminder that beauty existed even in times of uncertainty. She hadn't slept. She spent the night reviewing data, preparing for final arguments, imagining scenarios, but mostly thinking about Admiral Carr. Evelyn had visited the medical facilities where he was confined. Physically, he had recovered from the battle wounds, but mentally, spiritually, he was broken. He sat in silence, staring into the void, his mind trapped in an infinite loop, re-experiencing those terrible minutes when his fleet was destroyed. The doctors said he would eventually recover. Evelyn wasn't so sure. Carr had lived his entire life believing in absolutes. Kanthara strength, imperial inevitability, superiority over all other species. Having those absolutes shattered in a matter of minutes was trauma from which some never recovered. But perhaps, she thought, as she watched the sunrise, that was the most important lesson. Absolutes were dangerous. Unshakable certainties led to blindness. True wisdom lay in recognizing that there was always something greater, always something new to learn. A soft beep announced a visitor. Evelyn opened the door to find Councillor Thorn, the first councillor, looking even more exhausted than she felt. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. Evelyn gestured for him to enter. The responsibility of 12,000 years of history has that effect. Thorn moved to the window, his 4 rear legs making rhythmic sounds on the floor. "Do you know the story of how the hegemony began?" Evelyn nodded. "Our ancestors were tribal hunters on a hostile world. They survived through forced cooperation, uniting against larger predators. And when there were no more larger predators on our world," Thorn continued, "we became the predators. We spread across the stars, conquered, absorbed, dominated, because it was all we knew how to do." He turned to face her. "But perhaps we forgot the original lesson. Cooperation is not weakness. It is how we survived in the first place." "Have you decided your vote?" Evelyn asked softly. Thorn was silent for a long moment. "I am old, Ambassador. I have lived 400 cycles, seen 5 generations of Kanthara leadership. I have witnessed conquests, revolts, glories, and tragedies. And through it all, one truth has remained constant. Those who do not adapt perish." "So you vote for integration?" He nodded slowly. "I vote for the future, whatever its form. But," he met her gaze, "it will not be unanimous. There will be resistance, perhaps even violence, from radical factions who prefer glorious death to humble life." Evelyn felt a shiver run through her exoskeleton. Are you suggesting civil war? I am suggesting that change of this magnitude does not happen without pain. But I also believe our species is resilient enough to survive the transformation. 2 hours later, Evelyn was back on the podium of the crystal chamber. But this time, not as a witness or analyst, as an architect of the hegemony's future. The council was in full session. 300 votes would determine the course. Thorn presided with solemn gravity. Councillors of the Canthara hegemony. His voice echoed through the living crystals. For 12,000 years, our empire has stood supreme. Today, we vote on whether that empire will have 12,000 additional years or whether it ends here, now by our choice or by extinction. He paused, letting the words sink in. 3 options have been presented. Integration into the human consensus, peaceful coexistence, or total war. Each councillor will vote by conscience and conviction. May the crystals bear witness to our choice. The voting began. It was not a quick process. Each councillor had an opportunity to speak, to explain their reasoning. Evelyn listened to passionate arguments from all sides. Radical councillors invoked ancestral honor, refusing to bow before any power, human or otherwise. 42 votes for war. Moderates argued for dignified isolation, maintaining autonomy while avoiding confrontation. 117 votes for coexistence. And progressives, led by Thorn, painted a vision of a renewed hegemony, maintaining identity while embracing necessary change. 141 votes for integration. When the last vote was cast, Thorn stood up by a margin of 141 votes. The Canthara hegemony chooses integration into the consensus. Let the records show that, confronted with our greatest crisis, we chose evolution over extinction. The chamber erupted. Some councillors celebrated, others protested furiously. Many simply sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Evelyn felt the weight on her shoulders simultaneously increase and decrease. The decision was made. Now came the real work of implementation. In the weeks that followed, the capital buzzed with activity. Delegations were formed to negotiate terms of integration. Reforms were initiated to align Canthara practices with consensus standards. And inevitably, resistance arose. Radical factions attempted sabotage. 2 space stations were damaged before security contained them. There was an assassination attempt against Thorn that failed by inches, and 3 border worlds declared independence, refusing to accept the new order. But through it all, the process continued, because the majority understood a fundamental truth. Change was inevitable, and those who resisted were left behind by history. 3 months after the vote, Evelyn found herself again on a diplomatic vessel. But this time, she was not alone. She accompanied a delegation of 50 Canthara, representing all castes of society, traveling to Earth to formalize integration. The journey was very different from her first. Where before there was apprehension, now there was cautious curiosity. Where before there was fear, now there was tentative hope. When they emerged from hyperspace in the Sol system, Evelyn couldn't help but smile at the sight of the 3 titans still guarding the human homeworld. But this time, their presence was comforting, not threatening. They were guardians, not oppressors. The reception at the diplomatic station was warm. Secretary General Hayes greeted the delegation personally, and there were representatives from all 7 consensus species present to witness. "Welcome back, Ambassador Evelyn," Hayes smiled genuinely. "And welcome all of you to the new era." The formal integration ceremony was held on Earth itself, in the city humans called Geneva. Evelyn descended to the surface for the first time, feeling gravity that was only slightly weaker than her homeworld's, breathing air that smelled different but was perfectly breathable. And she saw, for the first time, how humans truly lived. The cities were vertical gardens, structures that blended technology and nature in harmony, parks where children of multiple species played together, markets where merchants exchanged not just goods, but ideas and culture. But it was in the Great Assembly Hall that Evelyn witnessed something that changed her perspective forever. Representatives from all consensus species gathered. Humans, Velhari, Kreshta, Thyran, and 3 other species Evelyn was still learning about. And now, Canthara. There was no obvious hierarchy. There was no clearly superior dominant species. There were only sentient beings, each contributing their unique strengths, each respected for their differences. And above it all, visible through the transparent ceiling of the hall, one of the Titans hovered in low orbit, a silent reminder that protection was guaranteed, but also that responsibility was shared. Hayes approached Evelyn during a break in negotiations. "How are you feeling, Ambassador?" Evelyn considered the question. "Terrified," she admitted. "Hopeful, uncertain, all simultaneously." Hayes laughed gently. "Welcome to the human condition. We live in that state constantly." "How did your species manage it?" Evelyn asked genuinely. "How did you find the Titans and not become corrupted by the power they offered?" Hayes was serious. "We almost were. In the first years after discovery, there were factions that wanted to use the Titans for conquest, for domination, but the Titans refused. They did not respond to ambition or greed. They responded only to sacrifice and protection. And then," Evelyn pressed, "then we learned. Painfully, slowly, but we learned. The true strength is not in the capacity to destroy, but in the choice to protect. That power without wisdom is just violence. That the greatest achievement of any species is to elevate others, not subjugate them." Evelyn absorbed the words, feeling them resonate deeply. "That is what the architects wanted," she realized aloud. "When they created the Titans, they didn't just create weapons. They created teachers." Hayes nodded. "And the lesson is simple but profound. The maturity of a civilization is measured not by its capacity to wage war, but by its capacity to choose peace. Not by its strength, but by its wisdom." The integration ceremony took place at sunset, when Earth's yellow star painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Evelyn, representing the Canthara hegemony, stood beside Hayes and the leaders of all the other species. "Today," Hayes declared, "the galaxy becomes more complete. The Canthara hegemony, a 12,000-year civilization, joins the consensus, not as conquered, but as partners, not as inferiors, but as equals." And above them, all 12 Titans appeared simultaneously. Evelyn finally saw them, all together, 12 impossible black silhouettes arranged in a circular formation, guarding not only Earth, but now all the worlds of the expanded consensus. It was a vision of power that could destroy galaxies, but it was also a vision of protection that would preserve civilizations for ages to come. Councillor Thorne, who had made the journey despite his age, approached Evelyn after the ceremony. He looked up at the distant Titans and then at her. Did we make the right choice? He asked. Evelyn thought of Admiral Carr, still recovering in medical facilities at the capital. She thought of the worlds that resisted and were left in isolation. She thought of the challenges that were still to come, the changes that would be painful, the adjustments that would be necessary. But she also thought of the Canthara children who would grow up in a world where cooperation was the norm, not the exception. Of scientists who would have access to knowledge from multiple civilizations. Of a future where her species did not need to conquer to prosper. Yes, she finally replied. We made the right choice. Not the easy one, but the right one. 6 months later, Evelyn stood on an observation platform of a space station in orbit around New Horizon, the world that had been the target of the doomed Third Expeditionary Fleet. But this time, she was not there as an invader, or even as a cautious visitor. She was there as resident ambassador, overseeing the integration of Canthara colonies in the system's vicinity into the consensus. And as she looked out the window, she saw something she never would have imagined possible months ago. A joint construction vessel, designed by Canthara and human engineers working together, incorporating technology from 4 different species. It was not as advanced as the Titans. Nothing created by mortals ever would be. But it represented something perhaps more important, proof that different species could create together, build together, dream together. A voice interrupted her reflections. Ambassador Evelyn? She turned to find a young human, no more than 20 Earth years old. Yes? I'm Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, the Secretary General's granddaughter. I've just been assigned to Titan interface training. And, she hesitated, I was informed that you requested to accompany a training flight. Evelyn felt her antennae tremble with anticipation. Yes, if the Titans allow my presence. Sarah smiled. They allow it. In fact, the primary guardian specifically requested your presence. Primary guardian. That was what humans called the first Titan, the one that had faced the Third Fleet at New Horizon. Evelyn felt honor and terror in equal measure. Hours later, she was in a small shuttle approaching the impossible black silhouette. Up close, the Titan was even more impressive. Its surfaces seemed to absorb light. Its angles defied Euclidean geometry. Its very presence made the space around it curve in subtle but detectable ways. And then, for the first time, Evelyn heard its voice. It was not sound. It was direct communication with her mind, transmitted through fields she did not fully comprehend. But the message was clear. Welcome, tactical analyst Evelyn of the Canthara hegemony. You who had the courage to choose evolution over extinction. You who saw past pride to wisdom. Evelyn did not know how to respond to a millions of years old god of war. Finally, she thought simply, why did you spare us? When the fleet attacked, you could have destroyed us completely. The answer came imbued with something close to sadness. Because destruction is not the purpose. Protection is. We judge those who threaten innocence, yes, but we also offer opportunity for change. Your species chose change. Therefore, you deserve a future. And if we had chosen differently? Silence. Then, the Skaven chose differently. The result was extinction. But you know this. The real question is, why do humans choose differently than you? Why do they offer partnership where the hegemony would offer conquest? Evelyn considered. Because humans understand fragility? Because they know what it is to be vulnerable? In part, the Titan agreed. But more fundamentally, because humans learned that true strength is not in the capacity to destroy, but in the choice to protect. A lesson that took your species 12,000 years to begin to learn. The communication ended, but Evelyn remained there, floating beside the primary guardian, contemplating the vastness of space and the depth of wisdom that had taken her civilization millennia to discover. When she finally returned to the station, Evelyn knew that something fundamental had changed within her. She was no longer just Canthara. She was part of something greater, something that transcended species or empire or power. She was part of the consensus, and the consensus, under the eternal vigilance of the Titans, represented a future where all sentient species could prosper. In the hegemony capital, now renamed the Canthara Sector Capital, in recognition of its altered status, Councillor Thorne presided over the transformation of a civilization. It was the work of generations, but it had begun. And in a silent medical facility, Admiral Carr finally awoke from his stupor. He looked out the window to see a passing ship, a joint construction of Canthara and humans. And for the first time since the defeat, he felt something beyond despair. He felt curiosity, perhaps even hope. The hegemony had fallen. But from its ashes, something new was born. Not an empire, but a community. Not domination, but partnership. And above it all, 12 Black Guardians watched, ensuring that the lesson learned with so much suffering would never be forgotten. True strength was not in the capacity to wage war, but in the wisdom to choose peace. The 12,000-year empire had ended, but a future of infinite possibilities was just beginning. If the Canthara hegemony's journey from conquering empire to consensus partner inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more chronicles from the galactic frontier, where humanity and its alliances face the challenges of the cosmos. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story about courage, wisdom, and the transformative power of choice. Together, we explore not just the stars, but what it truly means to evolve as a civilization. Until the next journey among the stars.